Well, overseas now, authorities in Japan have revealed the Coast Guard plane which collided with a passenger jet on a major Tokyo runway was not cleared for takeoff. All 379 people on board the Japan Air passenger flight miraculously escaped after the plane burst into flames as it landed at Haneda Airport. 5 of the 6 people on board the smaller Coast Guard plane died in the collision. Only the pilot survived. The Coast Guard plane was due to depart on a flight to provide earthquake aid to people on the country's west coast. Aviation officials are still investigating the crash.
Guy in the right seat, because you're entering and you're turning left to take off on 34 right. The guy in the right seat should have visually checked the approach path, because there would have been a whole row of landing aircraft coming in, all of them lit up like Christmas trees with landing lights on, strobe lights and everything else. So obviously they didn't look to see that the approach was clear.
Well, joining me now live is Aviation Projects Managing Director Keith Tonkin. Really appreciate your time, Keith. So this is a pretty crucial development ahead of a full investigation. I guess investigators here in Australia try to do no-fault investigations, but it seems this development may apportion a fair bit onto the Coast Guard plane for this incident.
Morning, Simon. Yeah, it seems as though there's been a terrible error made by the crew of the Coast Guard aircraft by taxiing onto the runway in front of the landing A350. That's very regrettable, no doubt. But there are lots of other things to think about in terms of the air traffic control procedures, the communications, the weather, the crew, and all sorts of other different circumstances and factors that need to be considered and will be thoroughly investigated and reviewed before anyone starts making any findings about what happened and why.
Can you give us a bit of a sense of perspective here in terms of this incident? Is there anything that's happened in recent memory that could be comparable to this?
There are the odd accidents around the world for various reasons involving aircraft or other vehicles moving onto runways. Runway incursions are always a concern for airports around the world, and there's significant programs in place to prevent those incursions and the terrible situation that has occurred in Japan. The worst one ever was the 2 747s crashing in Tenerife many years ago now, the worst aviation accident in terms of numbers of passengers that were killed in that accident. But yes, from time to time we do have unfortunate situations like this that result in pretty catastrophic consequences.
What do you make of how Japan Airlines has responded? They seem to have taken a proactive stance, saying to future passengers, if you don't want to travel, we'll offer refunds. Is that a good thing?
I think that's appropriate in the circumstances, because there will be some people who will be very concerned for their own safety as a result of this accident. And in the meantime, the airline will no doubt be reviewing procedures and understanding to the best they can the reasons for the situation and what they can do to try and prevent that from happening again. So there'll be plenty of work going on inside the airline and also with air traffic control procedures and the broader aviation system in Japan, as well as around the world, to make sure the situation is well understood as possible, to make sure that it can be prevented in the future.
Well, Keith Tonkin, do appreciate your analysis and insight. Thank you so much for your time this morning here on Sky News.
You're welcome.